Hey, all you cool cats and kittens on the internet watching. It's David Gordon from TheaterMania here with Alex Timbers, director of Beetlejuice, Moulin Rouge, Oh Hello, Here Lies Love, Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, Peter and the Starcatcher. I was trying to do them all, but
It's very sweet. Thank you.
off the top of my head. What did I forget? Love's Labor's Lost.
Oh yeah, I love Love. Yeah, absolutely.
How are you doing? How are things?
Doing okay. Given everything that's going on. How about you?
Good. We're here. We're here on the internet. Are you keeping busy? Are you working on projects at the moment, or are you just like taking in this time for like a vacation?
No, I sort of not so great when I'm not working. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of reading and watching things like most people, and then I've been revising some scripts and doing that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your career because you've directed so many shows, you've created so many shows, and everything. Like there's no one like Alex Timbers-esque thing, which I think is really cool about your work. Did you always want to be a director? Did you always want to go into theater? Like, did you want to be an actor or anything like that?
That's a great question. When I was growing up, I went to an all-boys school that had the great thing of always having a school play every year. Mm-hmm. So I was actually, one of the things I've been doing over this time is transferring old school plays and things like the DVD. And I think I was quite a ham. Looking back, I was like, I just found a picture of myself playing Mrs. Gloop in Charlie Chocolate. I was really like stealing some scenes. So I think I had some theater background. I grew up in New York, but I never really thought about being an actor. I knew I wasn't very good, and I went to college and started doing improv and sketch comedy, and that was kind of my performance way into performance. And got really interested, as you do as like a kind of like nerdy kid, into comedy and the mechanics of comedy.
Yeah.
Into directing a farce, like a French farce, and that was my sort of gateway into like directing all sorts of theater. But it really started from improv and sketch going into farce. How do you
break into the directing community in New York? You worked on Jersey Boys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also like a stumper. My first job out of college was I was Lynn Meadows' intern at Manhattan Theater Club, which was awesome. Gives you such a vantage point to like see how projects are put together. And there was this kind of adage I had heard at the time that you have to have gray hair to direct. And I looked around and I was thinking to myself, wow, yeah, like there aren't a lot of like, when you're in college, you're like, oh, I'll do like Thornton Wilder or Chekhov, and hiring like 23-year-olds to do that. And so I thought about, well, what's the path? Like, how can I create my own work? And that was through founding a theater company, an off-Broadway theater company. And I think, I assisted on different, worked for other off-Broadway theater companies like Prospect Theater Company, which does amazing stuff. And it's sort of what became clear is that there's so many off companies. I think there are at least like 300 at any one time but most of them have one of four mission statements, like doing classics with a twist, or, like we're doing this kind of thing, and so it felt to me having a really specific mission statement would be important. And luckily I was really interested in this bizarre stuff about doing work about historical figures and with using like contemporary, kind of schoolhouse rock kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, let's that'll be the mission, and I'll continue doing that stuff because it's from the heart and it's stuff I love, and then eventually Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson's came from that. Yeah. Right.
That was Frere Corbusier, your company.
Les Frere Corbusier, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which is the idea of it was it was like doing pretentious theater,
Right.
But when you think about the title, it's actually stupid. It's the Corbusier brothers, and so that framed the dialectic of what that company was about.
Where did that name come from?
Tell me, I don't want to be long-winded, but I had worked with some friends on a theater piece. So I had taken a class in college about experimental theater.
Sure.
I had this amazing teacher, and he had a little video monitor. He'd bring in and play like Worcester Group shows and Richard Maxwell, and and we were just baffled. We didn't, as students, we didn't understand like how this stuff wasn't like just like self-regarding and inflated. And we didn't realize that any of it had a sense of humor, basically, which a lot of it does. And so my friends and I created this fake experimental dance piece based on kind of like what we thought was happening. BAM Next Wave, 1984. And it was about these guys who were descendants of Le Corbusier. We all wore sherbet-colored pants and little white T-shirts, and we danced to Steve Reich and Philip Glass music using gestural choreography and told the history of math. So the piece was called Un pièce de mouvement historique avec la géométrie. And it was impenetrable. Thomas Jefferson appeared, Copernicus appeared. There were no words. And what you needed to experience it, to fully understand it, was you were given a course packet at the beginning of the piece, and there was a half-hour reading. The piece was only 20 minutes, but half an hour at the beginning in which you would read these primary sources. There was an outline explaining what was about to happen, and then blank pages at the back where you could take your own notes. So it was a truly like academic piece of comedy theater, and we were the descendants of Corbusier, and that spawned the name for the company. That was a long story.
I love that story. That story is insane. That production sound. I wish I was old enough, because I'm in my early 30s, but I wish I was like old enough and more cognizant of the downtown theater scene while Fred Corbusier was doing a lot of the early stuff. And like when you were doing Very Merry Unauthorized Scientology Pageant, which is a show that I love the album of, but never got to.
Oh, yeah. Kyle's music is incredible.
Yeah. I should note, if you have questions for Alex and you're watching, pop them in the comments. We'll look them over. If they're cool, we'll ask them. So how did Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson come about? Well, when did you start working with Michael Friedman?
I idolized Michael. Like, I went to see all the civilian shows, and like I'd heard of Canard Goose, like that show. It was like, this like mythological thing. I've still never seen it or heard it, but it felt to me like he was a kindred spirit, and so I kept trying to meet with him, and I asked him to do the music for one of the Les Frères shows, and he said no. And I said, well, can we have coffee or something? And so we had like a kind of creative date. Kurt Deutsch from Chick Boom Records put us together, connected us. So always grateful to him for that. And I've had I'm sure you have too, like a lot of these kind of creative blind dates where like nothing kind of comes out. You say, oh yeah, we should work together someday. But we were sitting there, and Michael said, yeah, I know you love historical figures. And I had been talking about my love of like emo music and how like the sincerity, irony, like tension was real. I was like, I want to do something about emo music.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, I know you love historical figures. I took this class at Harvard on Andrew Jackson. It was all about like an entire class on Andrew Jackson. And he was like, isn't Andrew Jackson kind of the ultimate emo president? And I was like, that's a great idea. So it was like literally in half an hour, we had a show. And then I spent about 14 months hounding him, sending him outlines, trying to get him to, and I don't know if he like really thought we were actually doing this. And then finally I got the people at Williamstown were nice enough to say, here, they love Michael. So they he had done like 6 or 7 seasons at that point. So like, here's a slot to do a workshop. And I said, okay, I think are we actually going to like do this? And he was okay. And then no music had been written, and every morning he would be outside the little log cabin where we were doing the workshop, and he would write a new song in that half hour. And he wrote 13 songs, and all 13 songs ended up in the show. Not a song was cut. And yeah, that was the process.
That guy was, forever will be a genius.
Amazing, yeah.
So you worked on that with him. You worked on Love's Labor's Lost, which I think Love's Labor's Lost is one of my favorite contemporary musicals, and because it really like played that half a month period at the Delacorte 5 years ago. It's one of those things that no one really knows, I don't think.
Yeah.
But anybody watching, I encourage you to listen to the cast album for Love's Labor's Lost, the musical. Patty Muir and Rebecca Naomi Jones, Greg Hildreth, your regular troupe of actors.
Yeah, there were amazing people. Daniel Breaker. Donald is like is awesome company of actors. Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, they break into "To Be With You," the Mr. Big song.
Oh yeah, that was great. We also had I don't know if we were the first, but we had the this band, high school band from
Yeah.
like I think New Jersey. Actually I think it's the high school that Aaron Tveit went to, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, and they had like 60 kids, and they came in with tubas at the end and played this whole the Middletown Marching Middies, I think. It was awesome. Yeah.
It hurts me that the band section is not on the album.
Yeah, I know.
But I can't imagine the logistics of recording that whole thing.
Sure.
Were you and Michael working on anything while he passed, while he was sick?
Yeah, we had been working with Rob Askins, who's a playwright I love, and we've been working on adapting the documentary "The King of Kong,"
Oh,
Donkey Kong Jr., and
yeah,
ultimately it's about good and evil and justice in the world.
right.
And Michael, we had just done a reading of a full draft of it, and Rob, I wasn't a writer on it. It was Rob and Michael, and their work together was awesome. And Kim Grigsby was the music director. Yeah. So it was just really sad because I was about to kind of, it had all been written.
Right. Do you think anything will happen with it, or at this point is it?
I hope so. I don't know what the best way to, it's hard when you think about someone who would, he was such a wildly inventive rewriter. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think you'd want to just, I don't know. I imagine you want to just like do the thing and say it's done.
Right.
So, maybe a concert of it would be a good thing, or recording it somehow. It was, fantastic work, and really like tonally super in his wheelhouse, and it was wildly emotional and funny and smart, which is all him. Do
you look at Bloody Bloody as your personal breakthrough, like for the industry?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely was the show that was the kind of culmination of a lot of work, and basically we did one more show, but I pretty much folded my company after that, because it's sort of, you're like, okay, this is the thing I don't know how to develop the ideas further. So it felt like not about a show, it felt like about a 10-year period of work.
Because I feel like that and Starcatcher were the ones where the industry really, where like the Uptown industry really discovered Alex Timbres.
Oh yeah, I love Peter and the Starcatcher. That show was incredible too. Yeah.
Tell me about working with Roger Rees, the late, as a director. Like, how much did that influence you?
Like a lot. So obviously Peter and the Starcatcher owes a huge debt to Nicholas Nickleby, which was like, the thing that I think many people first caught wind of him doing it, and the sort of the greatest piece of story theater ever, arguably. And we got to work together. Actually, like I met him through, I think, Bloody Andrew Jackson, because he was the artistic director of Williamstown. So similar to Michael, not to sound like I stalk people, but I was like, idolized him. And so we had done a workshop in a cafeteria of Bloody Andrew Jackson. And then the next year he was kind enough to say, I'm working on this thing. And at that point it was just a book. And so Roger and a guy named Ken Chernelia, a dramaturg, we started, looking at it, and just blue sky, and saying like, okay, maybe Act 1 should be like on the boat, Act 2 should be on the, making big choices. And then the thing that really made it magic was Rick Ellis coming on board and actually bringing it just like weird nascent staging ideas to life.
Yeah.
That amazing play.
That show is magical. That show is truly magical. I'm going to bring in a question from a viewer. When you read a new musical or play for the first time, what's the thing that jumps out at you that makes you want to direct it?
That's a great question. I love, I think, when I feel like a connection to the writer and I can just hear the rhythms, I think is something that comes something that like immediately, like I'm hooked from page one. I think about emotional relatability, like, do I emotionally connect to the piece? And then finally, and this is probably the most bizarre thing, I always think about, am I uniquely the best person to direct this?
Mhm.
Oftentimes I'll come to like playwrights or producers and say, oh, I think actually Trip Coleman or Annie Kaufman or someone would be the best person, and I would love to do this, but I think, the people work on their plays for so long, so I always want to make sure like that person has the best person. But for something like Beetlejuice, I feel like in my heart, like, oh, I think I'm like, that's a great fit.
Yeah.
But if I can always think of like, oh, Casey should do this, like I want to always just be really honest with people. So it's not usually so much about quality of material, it's about my like connectedness to it, and like whether or not like I think I can uniquely bring something special to a show.
Yeah, I was going to say the aesthetic of Beetlejuice and especially the aesthetic of Moulin Rouge,
Mm-hmm.
just the physical aesthetic of it are what I think of when I think of like Bloody Andrew Jackson, both downtown at the Public and like when the horse was hanging over the audience when it was on Broadway. How do you describe your aesthetic, or how do you think about what things should look like? That makes sense.
I think theater is a visual medium, and so I think the visuals matter. I care about that. I care about that. I think it is something that's emotionally additive, and so I think the visual aesthetics are a part of, are something that is important to me, and I don't know that I have uh, I don't know that I would know how to describe like an aesthetic, but I do love working with designers, and I love working with actors. And my favorite period of time is the technical rehearsal process, because for years with someone like Sophie Ann Caruso or Alex Brightman, we'll be working on Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
And we'll be working in workshops and working with the writers, and we'll be working in the rehearsal rooms. And then for 6 years, I worked with David Corns and then William Ivy Long and all these amazing people, and you sometimes get them together, but it's not really until the technical process where everyone's in the room together. Sophie Ann Caruso, William Ivy Long, and David Corns, and we're all telling the story together.
Yeah.
And I love that. I don't believe in siloing people, so I think if someone has a note about someone else's business or someone else has a thing, as long as people are gentle and generous, like I like people to be talking to each other, because I think we're all want to be telling the exact same story. It's one of the things I think that Gentleman's Guide that Darko and his team did so brilliantly, is like everyone, actor, designer, writer, orchestrator, everyone on that stage was telling the exact same story, which is like all the oars were facing the same way. And I think that's the job of the directors, to orient everyone. But personally, I love the part where we're all in the same room together.
What was the hardest part of Moulin Rouge, the film, to bring to the stage?
That's fantastic. I think I like, obviously, like working with my own company, the aesthetics of Moulin Rouge, the kind of interests of Moulin Rouge, the kind of like high drama, low comedy of it, are all things that felt, like I felt like a kinship to, and a connection to. I think thinking about Baz's camera work and how you make something that is wildly virtuosic, but you don't have whip pans, you don't have editing. How do you translate that into theatrical terms was one thing. And two, how do you make Satine's death as emotional as possible at the end? How do you really make that feel as cathartic and profound? I think those were the two biggest challenges that at the beginning I was like, I want to figure these things out.
How much of a challenge was the music?
Yeah, it was challenging creatively, but also logistically. Justin Levine is brilliant. I've been working with him since Blade by Andrew Jackson. And he did this, we had this wonderful experience at the beginning of the process of treating Moulin Rouge like just a story.
Mhm.
We were breaking any new musical, and I hauled my girlfriend's keyboard to like a hotel room in Midtown, and John Logan, Justin Levine, and I holed up with note cards. Broke story. John did this great job. We started talking about song spotting. Justin had like all these different ideas of this song, this song, this song. Played on the keyboard, put things together, and so that was one aspect, that kind of creative aspect that was exciting and long.
Yeah.
And there was the logistical aspect, which Justin was involved with. Our music producer Matt Stein was the amazing producing team at Global Creatures was as well, which was then going out and like charts and charts and charts of like going out and how do you get the rights for these songs, and dealing with like what is it if you're using just like a bar of the horns for this song versus the whole song of this, and how do those interrelate, and how does that make sense on a, you know, how do you compensate people for that stuff that's totally beyond my pay grade. So I guess the short answer is very complex. Yeah.
Is directing something like Moulin Rouge or Beetlejuice or any like massive Broadway production like that similar or different to directing, you know, John Mulaney, Kid Gorgeous?
It's I think it's similar. I would say that the two things, they're different in that like working with like on something like Kid Gorgeous or the Pee Wee Herman show, or you know, even in some of the projects with David Byrne, like there's what I think in those situations you're usually brought on as a director to help take something that's brilliant that's already there and elevate it a little bit or clarify storytelling or things like that. Whereas I think Moulin Rouge or Beetlejuice or Played by Andrew Jackson, it's a little bit more like the creation from the nugget of the idea. So I think they're sort of different, but you know, the things you care about it, the audience and the, you know, the emotional connection and the comedy and the viscerality of it, those are the same.
How did well, first, how did Paul Rubens find you? Or did you like know his people? And then I want to ask the same question about how Kroll and Mulaney hooked up with you.
It all goes back to a show called Gutenberg.
Right.
2007. That I got hired on because of Jeremy Shamus
Mm-hmm.
and Nina Hellman, who I did a lot of these the Les Frères shows with. And it was a show that's an amazing show written by two of the Beetlejuice writers about a fake backers audition for it's a 2-minute show about the worst musical ever, which is a Les Mis style production of the life of Johann Gutenberg. Not much is known.
Right.
And from that, a couple of things happened. I think that's how I met the Disney folks to eventually sort of become a part of Peter and the Starcatcher. It's how this producer Jared Geller and David Foster saw my work, and they connected me with Paul. And then I think that's actually the first thing that John and Nick had seen. I think Nick and I had a general after Blay Blay Andrew Jackson, where it was one of these wonderful coffees where you're like, I like your work, I like your work. We work in totally different mediums. We'll probably never work together.
Right.
But they loved Gutenberg, and I think that was partly what was inspiring to them about the idea of like potentially a stage show of these amazing characters they had created. But I think the roads lead back to Gutenberg in a way.
Gutenberg is another one of the shows that you hear about, like Canard Goose. You hear about it, mm-hmm. and then every now and then they'll do like they did a reunion concert a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was amazing.
But I've never seen it, and I've always wanted to. So that's just another one.
Like, you know, knowing a bit about your sense of humor, I think you'd like it.
Was it fun and freeing to create Beetlejuice, or was it a daunting task to bring to life this Tim Burton classic?
You know, there's a lot of responsibility, I think, because I love that movie and I love the cartoon series as well, and I love just Tim Burton's work. I think at the beginning, thinking about what are the principal ideas that will make it a theatrical piece and make it emotional, were the things that made me really excited about working on it, thinking, okay, we can make it about Lydia, and we can make it about Beetlejuice's relationship with Lydia. We can set it all in a house, and the house can transform. That feels theatrical. We're going to save going to the netherworld until the end. Like, a bunch of these ideas started to make me feel like, oh, this could be a theater piece where we can take Beetlejuice and not just recreate it on stage, but kind of start to imagine, if Lydia is our Elphaba, like how we can create something that feels additive or supportive, as opposed to something that feels like you're recreating something, which wouldn't have been interesting. So the fidelity to the spirit of it was really important, but being able to create something new was something we were really grateful to have the permission and license to do. And that was true of Moulin Rouge too, honestly. Like, from the beginning, he was this amazing theater artist. He made Strictly Ballroom as a play first. He was like staging Shakespeare in India and stuff like this before he was making these amazing movies. So he was very, from the beginning, he was like, this is an adaptation. This needs to be its own thing. He's like, I would be sad if you tried to recreate just the movie on stage. And so I've been pretty lucky so far in getting to work with, when there is existing material, getting to work with collaborators who are like, go for it. I don't want, I wouldn't hire you guys or want to do this if it was the same thing.
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone also seemed really all in when you guys were doing Rocky.
Yeah, he was cool. He was a really cool guy.
That show, the thing with the ring, and you posted a video of it on Instagram.
Yeah.
I've spent years trying to figure out the logistics of, like, how long was that tech period? Because you did it in Germany first, right?
Yeah, it was the same tech period in New York as Germany. It was like 3 weeks and 2 days, I think. It was, I think, similar to what we had for Moulin Rouge too. The ring was cool. So the ring, first of all, the set designer was this guy, Chris Barreca, who's
genius.
He runs the design program at Cal Arts, which is like, the greatest, from my point of view, the greatest like design program in the country. And which I think Tim Burton went to, by the way. Mm-hmm. And basically the ring, does this work? Not making a square. I'm going to give up. Was on a gantry. Yes, mm-hmm. There you go. And so the ring there was a shipping gantry above the stage that could go up and down above the grid, and the ring hung from that. And then by these wires, the ring could go like this, the ring could go like that, or the ring, you could get someone to get on top of the ring, and like at the beginning of the final fight, goes down. Ooh, that's great. Yeah. The ring descends, they uncable it, and then the front of the stage the middle of the stage was on a slip stage. So what that means is that it can actually move forward on a cantilever. Mm-hmm. So once the ring descended, the ring was pushed to the front of the stage. And then as the audience got up and came around, the whole middle of the stage actually tracked down stage, and the audience could go in 360. Basically, I've been working on Here Lies Love at the same exact time.
Yeah.
Here Lies Love, we went from 360 to proscenium for the final 10 minutes. And for Rocky, my thought was, could we go from proscenium to 360 for the final 10 minutes? So there was parallel working on both those shows at the same time.
That must have been the most fun nightmare to possibly try to figure out in a Broadway compressed period of time.
Yeah, it was a little intense, and it didn't always work.
Okay. Someone wants to know, there are a lot of people that want to know what advice you have for aspiring directors and like people that are looking to pursue this as a career.
Yeah, I think, the key thing that I felt like that I really look back on and am grateful for was the idea of creating your own work, not waiting to get hired by other people. If you can be, that's great. If you can assist, if you can watch as much as possible, if you can do fellowships, all that stuff's amazing. But if you're lucky enough to be in the situation where you can actually make your own projects and be the person that's hiring yourself, to put it out there, and then I think that's the best thing. The other thing I think is seeing as much theater as possible. I worked for the New Victory in programming, which is this amazing like theater in New York that does work for young people, but it's like international work. It's really sophisticated. And I thought seeing like Italian puppetry and Australian circus and shadow puppetry from Russia and all that stuff, it really just teaches you to know, okay, I like this, I prefer this, or I don't like this. So seeing as much stuff, and so you develop your own taste and sense of like, I like what you prefer and the type of work you want to make, I think is also key. So you're not just like, I like doing plays, you know, I think
Yeah.
it's have a point of view.
This is an interesting question, and I want to know not just as a design team. So the question is, how do you approach and cultivate your design team as a director? But I also want to know how you approach like creating the group of actors, because there is a regular Alex Timbers repertory company in a lot of your shows. So how do you do that?
I think I had this realization during Peter and the Starcatcher, which was that one of the things that made that show so successful was, from my point of view creatively, was that all of the actors were really like almost to a person were multi-hyphenates. You know, you have someone like Kevin DeLaguila who played Smee, who's also a writer, who's also a director. And I felt like surrounding yourself with people who think about theater from different perspectives are great people to have in the room, because they're the ones that are saying, hey, what if I did this, or what if I did that, or like, so I think what you'll find is the people I'm really attracted to are people who are actors, but who are, you know, also creators in other ways. And I think it's also coming from downtown theater, where, you know, you have a lot of shows like, you know, the Worcester Group, often they don't take a writer credit. On Blah Andrew Jackson, I hardly thought of myself as a writer that would go up in a room and come down and say, this is the script. It was like the best lines in that thing, I will candidly say, are Greg Hildreth, Ben Walkers, Lucas Nierverburgis. I mean, they were, you know, and it was like, that's way better. Let's just say that instead. So I think it's about building a room where there's permission to say anything, and staffing that room with smart people who think from a variety of perspectives.
I want to. There are people that are popping in comments about what's happening with Beetlejuice. So Beetlejuice was forced to close because of the shutdown. The shutdown getting passed. Do you have anything you can say about future life, a tour? Is everything still in the works?
We have a tour that's supposed to happen in a little over a year, which is going to be really exciting. And then, you know, there are a couple of sort of opportunities that have presented themselves for Beetlejuice, two in particular that I think are really cool, that are potential for Beetlejuice coming back to New York. And it's just, with everything going on, it's impossible to know what's, you know, to predict anything. But you know, I'm not a super optimistic person generally about these things. I've been through the mill a bunch, but I'm optimistic about that Beetlejuice will be back in New York City.
How did you realize that show all of a sudden was becoming like, from getting like roasted by critics, to just suddenly becoming the thing that everybody's singing on TikTok and is suddenly making 1.3 million a week?
Well, look, we had a hunch in DC because people really loved it, and before the reviews came out, and then it was weird. It was like everyone suddenly in the theater felt differently about it. So that was like a wild thing to observe. In New York, I think that the Tony performance was a helpful turning point, because I think it allowed a lot of people who might not have access to the show to like sort of get a sense of its personality, and a sense of the writing and Alex's performance and all the incredible actors. And then, you know, and our hope was, by creating, you know, was that it would emotionally connect with people, and that people would love the sense of humor and irreverence. I mean, we love it. I mean, I worked for 10 years on that show. I love it so much. So I think it was like after the Tonys, there's a turning point. Then seeing that the cast sound, people are just streaming it, and the numbers are like extraordinary in terms of the number of listens to it. And then people start creating their own content around the show, and I think it's a good show for you know, puckish, cheeky, playful, like all these characters. So I think it's a good basis for that. But then by September, when things were supposed to really get sluggish for everyone, and Beetlejuice actually was sort of powering through, that's when it felt like, oh, maybe this is something that that actually is not just like a seasonal thing. Maybe and you know, when you have like people dressing up like tertiary characters, like multiple people in the audience are like cosplaying that like random character that comes in for like 3 minutes, you're like, this there's something, there's people are, you know, that's another point where you're like, maybe something's happening.
I want to leave you with the question of, you do so much new stuff. You do mostly new stuff. Are there any classics you want to work on, musicals, plays, just like bucket list things that you've always wanted to direct or?
Yeah. I definitely, you know, there's a Rocky Horror that I really want to do. You know, a space I love is like these, is that area between where comedy and plays meet, like the Oh Hello, Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
So like, I'd like to, you know, find more work in that terrain too, where it's not as much, you know, like about, where it's really just about the virtuosity of a couple performers and the connection between actor and audience. That's a place where I feel really, you know, I think is exciting and people always love, and I think there's always a place for that on Broadway. And so I'm curious, in the revival world, I'm looking at that stuff too.
I really want to hear what your take on Rocky Horror is, but you don't have to do it live on camera if you don't want to. Alex, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. We're back Monday, 2 o'clock Eastern with Tony winner Beth Level. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.